Call the meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee to order at about, I guess it's 6:03, 6:02, according to my watch. Are there any excused absences, other than our chair? He reported at the last meeting that he was not going to be here, so that would be an excused absence. Other than that, the other members, if we don't know, okay. Could y'all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Would you like roll call?
Call to order.
Yeah, let's do the roll call. Need to know who's here.
Alternate member Andrew Forster. Alternate member Wendy Fuller. Member Anna Olvera. Member Joanne Roberts. Member Stephen Martino.
Here.
Vice Chair Richard Beneke.
Present, here.
Steve Cooley is absent. Treasurer Sharon Geiser.
Here.
Council Member Santos.
Here.
Mayor Carroll.
Here.
Okay, are there any requests, let's see, approval or any adjustments to the agenda that we're aware of? Okay. Any kind of conflict of interest disclosures? Okay. Any person may address the committee on any matter not on this agenda. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public comment form provided at the back table and give it to the committee chair or secretary. There is a 3-minute limit on public comments. There will be no sharing or passing of time to another person. State law prohibits the committee from discussing or taking actions brought up by your comments. Do we have any public comments at this time?
Yes, we do.
And who's that?
Judy Bingham.
Judy Bingham, please come forward.
Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. You know, every time I have to come to these meetings, I get more and more disgusted. To come here and watch Milana Taylor's incompetence on parade. How many years to get the new software working? We all sat through that. How many times have I brought in records and information and given it out to people that sat on this committee? Instead, they all tried to shut Libby and I up about the financial statements, but continued paying their consultants and lawyers millions of dollars. You all had a chance to clean up Beaumont, but I don't see that that's happening because we're going back to just the way Beaumont was in the beginning. How many came in, and I've been to almost every meeting, came in after the raids, oh, we're going to be transparent. Oh, and, you know, 10, 15 people signed up. What happened to all of them? I'm sure they were as disgusted as I am. And Elaine Morgan left when she understood that you all have a responsibility. Receive and file does not mean that you will not be held accountable. Hey, let's take this seriously. Our financial statements are serious.
Thank you, Judy. Anyone else?
Yes. Libby Urimovic.
Libby?
You all have a copy of this set of documents that I brought in today. If you turn to the back page, 2 pages before the end, the last few pages are your general ledger. Last month I came in and I told you your general ledger is 400 pages long. The last one to be produced was September 2017, 649 pages. The last page is the fund summary. If you look at it, it looks something like this. Beginning balances, 0. Ending balances, 0. That's not how this works. Do y'all know what basic accounting? In the month of September, you did not have $12,741,000 in bond transactions. That money is in the beginning balance, but there were no transactions in the month. And then there is an ending balance. The records are not set correctly, and I don't know how to explain this any further. You cannot fake documents. You cannot fake financial statements. You cannot fake accounting. It's accounting. It's like putting a puzzle together. You can't just put it together any way you want to make it fit. It has to be done properly. You have to hire an honest staff. You have to have 4 accountants on duty for this amount of work. You have to. And you can give me that look of disgust, but you have to have it.
Thank you very much. And you probably won't believe this, but I do appreciate the time you put into kind of reviewing a lot of this stuff. We also put a lot of time in reviewing these matters as well, and I think it's important for the community to realize that we do rely a lot on the staff and staff input. So, and our previous experiences with city government finances, which I have extensive experience in that arena and area. So I'm aware of what to look for when we're looking at budgets, and I'm very knowledgeable of city budgets. So I'm hoping that I will be able to be somewhat of an asset on this committee to be able to do what's right for the city of Beaumont. I do believe we're moving in the right directions. Are we there yet? We're not there yet. There are some areas we need work on, but we're moving in the right direction. I think that's important to realize as well. But anyway, I appreciate the input, and unfortunately, we, according to the state law, can't really discuss this stuff. It's unfortunate. I'd like to, but we can't. So, moving on, adoption of the minutes. Are there any amendments, corrections to the minutes? February 5th? Okay, we got a motion to adopt.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. We got the financial reports for January 2018, and it's my understanding that there were 4 reports, but reports 1 and 4 are going to be brought to the council. Is that true?
1 through 4.
Oh, 1 through 4.
Go to council at their next meeting, yes. Those
Okay.
are the same reports that they wish to have, so.
Okay. So you're up.
As we discussed, these are the regular recurring monthly reports for the Finance Committee. We have the current budget, the current month that we're reporting on, which is January, and the year-to-date activity for the general fund income statement. And then we have it compared so that we have the favorable and unfavorable against the budget. The numbers, I think, look really good, given that we're looking at January. We did a thorough review of the mid-year budget, and we've made budget adjustments for those already, which if we remain in line and the timing for payments that come in from the county and the state remain consistent as they have in prior years, then we should meet the budget without difficulty. The second report, also for the general fund, is comparing January of 17 to January of 18 and the year-to-date at that point for fiscal 16-17 and fiscal 17-18, so that we can see where we stand in relation this time last year and this year. There's a few areas where things have changed a little bit more than I would have expected, but we had some special circumstances in prior year related to the miscellaneous revenues, and we had more that occurred this year in the cost recovery, which made that one flip the other way. There's more revenues this year.
Okay.
The expenses are in line. They seem to be holding, and the way that the city is growing, the different areas of service, the change in expenses makes the most sense. So I haven't had any difficulty with that comparison report either. The third report is for the wastewater fund, all three of the funds that we have established. And it's the same as the first report as far as how it's set up, which is the budget, the January activity and year-to-date. The one area that we're looking at is the charges for service were not budgeted correctly. That should be the development impact fees. We're very obviously getting a great deal more of that than what we had originally budgeted. I believe it's related to the way that we did the budget for the mitigation fees in total for the year. So this wouldn't be the only fund that has this look for the mitigation fees. And then we have the costs, and they seem to be in line as well. The capital improvements, we are working on getting all of the activities accounted for properly in the new capital project fund for the wastewater and keeping all those costs segregated for CIP. The fourth report is the same format as report number 2, but it's only for the 3 wastewater funds. And you can see that in January of 2017, we didn't have any mitigation funds, so there must not have been any permits pulled from the planning department during January of 2017, but we had a great deal in January 2018. The other line items seem to be pretty much in line with what we would expect when we compare the 2 years to each other. The fifth report is the one that I handed out this evening, and that is our treasurer's report, which is really probably more correctly referred to as a treasury report. It is all of the different funds with the actual cash activity and ending cash balances at the end of January of 2018, and compared those balances to all the reconciled bank account balances and ensuring that one is indeed the same total as the other. And you can see that at the end of January, our general funds have now turned back to a positive balance, which is what we expected when we got our first tax wire from the county. So that has started to turn back around the way we expected it to. And if you have any other questions on the financial reports, I'd be happy to answer them.
There's still a few errors on the codes.
On the, where it says error or?
Yeah, it, like the percentages.
Oh, okay. I thought I caught all of them, but there could definitely still be some. So I'll fix the formulas.
Any other questions?
A couple questions with regards to the revenues in comparison with operating costs.
Yes.
Are we looking at a substantial expenditure beyond budget as far as our operating costs? I'm looking at, I think it's report number 2. In comparison to the same time last year. I don't know what the actual budget amount is per month. We just have an overall budget per year that we're
Right.
comparing a percentage with.
Right.
So, I mean, right now I'm noticing that we're substantially above the January large expenditure and operating costs for January.
Yes, and I believe that that is timing on a payment for some cleaning that we had done and some sludge removal, which would make that cost be a little higher for January this year than it was last year. But these are the typical recurring operating costs. I believe it's just related to the timing of them. As for the budget, right now we are doing it on an annual basis, and we're working with the directors for them to understand the budgeting process better as we go along. And as we move forward, we'll be able to actually make the kind of changes to where we can make the budget more specific on a month-to-month, every other month, quarterly, where some of these expenses actually do occur rather than have it just be a lump annual payment.
Yeah, I think that's important to do that because you get a better picture of your budget if you do it in real time versus waiting till the end of the year and then saying, oh, this is the way it looks like.
Right. And we're doing that with revenues too. We're starting to look at when do they come in. We know we don't get a lot of them at the front end of the year. A lot of them come in January through May, and making sure that when we start trending and moving forward, as we build these budgets, we build them on more detail, and we'll be able to look at each month, did it happen the way that we had planned for it to, and does that mean we need to make an adjustment in the next month?
If I read this correctly, on the last column, ahead of the variance percentage column, when we're looking at our revenue, we have an unfavorable position there versus the budget comparison, also unfavorable as far as revenue and operating expense. So were we looking at another month for tax revenue? We think we'll make a comparison comparable.
The next big month for tax revenues that come in is May. We have a significant amount then that will come in May.
How are the rest of our revenue streams coming in? I know the council, did you guys do a review of fees and stuff? Fees and stuff? Is that kind of coming in as expected, or?
They have been. We've been doing some analysis, especially with the planning department and the building and safety department, because when we did the fee study, it changed the structure of their fees the most. And so we've been doing some analysis on the number of permits pulled and how much each one is now based on the new fee schedule. But the fee schedule actually was put in place during January, so it's hard to see it with these financial reports, but it looks like the activity as far as the quantity of permits, that is holding about steady. So those increases in fees should start having an impact going forward.
I've been reading the paper recently. A lot of cities are looking hard at their fee schedules and stuff, because a lot of them have not been adjusted according, in terms of time passing and people forget or whatever. And oops, it's been 3 years since we took a hard look at this, and everybody's scrounging around looking for ways to raise a few extra dollars.
Right.
Oh, good.
Can I comment on the general fund for the 7 months? I really, compliment on you. I mean, because I've seen the, for 2 years, the progress we've been doing in this committee, and especially on the when you put together the November and then December. December is really way off because of the all the accruals and we have in there. Now on this report, you answered my questions on this on the miscellaneous revenues. There's a $3 million in there that now you said that that's a part of the recovery and everything.
Right, the $3 million from the prior year.
Yeah.
That was an income from one of the redevelopment agreements that was renegotiated. That was a fee that the city was able to collect. That would be a one-time revenue. So that was why it recurred in the prior year, but we wouldn't have it recur this year.
Very good. That's very good. I mean, if I look in this up for 7 months and everything in here is so consistent on the, compare on the budget in here, especially on the year-to-date activities. It's I'm looking on the 7.48% in there. That's really, really good. I mean, on the city, any corporation I do, involved with, and 7% is very, very good handle of, of the expenses and the revenue we have in there. So the way I see it is, it's very good. I mean, a progress on that. No, I mean, now on the waterways funds, since I'm talking, I mean, I'd rather throw you right now. You answered that again on the charges for services, the 759. I have a questions in there, but it's the mitigation fees.
Correct.
And that answered my questions in there. When I review it and everything this afternoon, I saw that. I said, wow, this is very good. On the variances, I mean, if we look on the budget itself, we're at 50% on the 50.5 in there. That's excellent. The reason I say excellent on that, we're on 7 months. Still, we have that 50% on the budget. So hopefully, if we receive that, the May you said on the other revenue in there, we will be really online. Even now, we're looking on the budget of positive of 21,000 in there. That's super good. I mean, I'm not praising you because of because I've been here for 2 years. Before we don't have this.
Right, we had a difficult time presenting any financial
Yeah.
information.
I've seen the thing. Now, back on the waterways funds on the comparative income statement for 7 months, I saw the your fiscal year of 2016 and 17, and I'm glad. You going this, man. I glanced it and everything. I do understand your number in here. I know what the city coming from and everything. On this one it's not accurate during the reporting on the 16 and 17, but I look on the 17 and 18. Now it's all accounted for. If you look on the net changes in there, and then the revenue and expenses, it's online. It's in line on the budget. So I said, oh, okay. And the changes in there is 15.3. 7. So waterways is really is doing well. If they keep up on that expenses. My question to you now on the waterways, is there any anticipation of big expenses in there? Because I look in here, the budget is good. Compared to the actual.
Right. The wastewater fund, we did do the budgeting, taking into consideration that we were looking at the expansion of the plant.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're doing now, the next step then is groundbreaking and trying to determine then, the next step. And I believe that's going to be part of the budget for next year. I don't believe it's going to happen prior to the end of June. That would be pushing things a little quicker than I think we're actually moving. So I don't anticipate anything big happening the rest of this year. I think it really is going to happen in the next fiscal period.
Okay, good. And then now we could close the book around September. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let me check on my note. Thank you.
Sure.
That answers all my questions in here. Thank you.
Any other further questions?
I was going to ask you, Milana, is there any revenue that you are anticipating that we may not get? Like when I look at the motor vehicle and road taxes.
We got the first installment of that in January, and it comes in the second installment in May. So that looks like when we get the May installment, that one will be made whole. And I think that one is going to be on target. When we did the mid-year analysis of all the revenues, it looks like they all are coming in the way that we expected them to. And we've changed a few contracts, specifically with the animal licensing, and that seems to be working out in a positive direction. We weren't certain if that was going to have any kind of impact on the revenues, but it is, which is good, a positive impact. And we're now looking at, I believe it was the last council meeting where we awarded a contract for the police department for their collection on fines. Yeah. And we're believing that once that starts rolling, that also will have a positive impact on our revenue as well. So I don't see anything that's falling off. It seems to be only moving forward, but we really are on target.
I have a quick question. On your report, everything looks pretty good. The only way to actually really know if it's going good would be, on a last year month or a quarterly comparison. But on your treasury report, we overspent more than what we collected in revenue. Is that what am I understanding this right? So.
Did I get to the right page? There we go. Yes.
So if I make the analysis that we're spending more than what we're collecting? Or is January just happened to be a crazy month that we overspent money?
We didn't overspend money. The way that this report generates, it is the revenues and the expenses, but it's also the changes in assets and in liabilities. So if there's changes in accrued payroll and things like that, that can make it look odd because it's a cash flow from the whole financial perspective. The expenses haven't been higher than normal. So I think it's just the way that it breaks it down between the categories, because it did end up with a positive cash flow balance, because this isn't just the month, this is the whole 7 months. And the revenues still will be down a little bit because we get a big chunk in May.
In May, and that'll offset that.
And that should bring it all right back up. Because the expenses continue month to month, relatively level, but the revenues do not.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have a question?
You had a question with regards to revenues, for instance, under category 40 for tax revenues, shown in both reports 1 and 2. For my own purposes, when I'm trying to clarify, when I'm looking at, for instance, the 6-month income statement that was given to us at the last meeting, and I'm looking at the breakouts under category 40, and again, that was a month ago, that was ending December 31st. Is there a section in here where one would look for to see, for instance, the CFD fees for services, not the actual capital bond transfers, but the CFDs for services that are collected from property owners? Where are they tracked as far as income, and do we track them specifically? Are we categorizing them per assessment district? And do we also track expenditures per assessment district? Is there a correlation where we have to spend that money for services in the same district that they're collected?
Good question. The CFD assessments, when we collect them, do not show up in these reports that you have. The CFD assessments are broken into 3 pieces. One is for debt service. It goes into an agency fund.
Which is the bond fees, right?
Right, the bond funds themselves. Then we have the administrative and maintenance portion of the assessments that come in, and they go into a restricted fund where they're maintained until we have the documentation to support the expenditures that we then release those monies over. We haven't done that assessment analysis yet for the maintenance and administration costs. The direct administration costs do go to that restricted fund so that they stay matched together. We are keeping track of everything by the individual improvement areas, so they will be broken down that way. That is a totally special fund on its own, and we can bring that report to the next meeting if this committee would like to see the CFD funds.
I'd like to see that, because my understanding is that's separate from the bond and capitalization. That's
correct.
That's support operating expenses, maintenance expenses that are assessed with that. And my understanding is whatever's collected on a specific district is supposed to go back within that specific district. If I understand the law correctly, I'm not.
Right, not entirely to just that specific district, but it should be spent in a way that it benefits that district. So the way that the bonds have been structured is a little different, but yes, we're tracking it that way.
But those are separate completely from the bonds, right? Those are just a service fee that.
Yes.
Okay. And is that anywhere in the documentation that we've looked at so far for this fiscal year? That we have any tracking?
When we started in the beginning looking at all the bazillion different reports, it was in those, but it hasn't been in what we had narrowed down. But we can, that's something we can easily bring back and make a part of the regular recurring monthly or quarterly reports.
I think that would be a good idea,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
we have some new people on the committee too, and they have not seen those reports, and I think it would be important for them.
Yeah, and they're probably going to have, for the most part, remittances into or transactions twice a year in December from the tax payments, and also and the majority of them in the following April, showing up in May.
We get a big chunk of them in January. That's that first installment. And then as the property transfers occur, and there's purchases and there's, the partial, we get little snippets from that point until May when we get the second big installment. But that is exactly how that works. They all go right into that restricted fund.
So would there possibly be, mean, is that money held within the master funds here, the accounts that are, the main account that would be represented in the fund, or is that a separate account that the
It
city
is
folks
in
would
the
use?
pooled cash account, but when you look at the cash treasurer report, it's going to be in the special revenue fund. It's held in special revenue funds, which we, at this point, the end of January, the total of that was just shy of $12 million. A good chunk of that is for CFD, for service and administration. And then, of course, the agency funds, we have $16 million, and the majority of that is for bond debt service.
Thank you.
Is that Fund 250, Milana?
For administration,
Is
yes.
it number 250?
Any other questions? We have a comment from the public,
Yes.
and who's that?
Libby Urimovich?
Libby?
Your January general fund had 29.4 million in it. Your LAIF has 35.3. That's all the money you have, except what they have over in a few little special funds in the Potrero Fund. That includes your special taxes. To give you a reference, your fire station fund should have about 35 million in it. Okay? I don't know I don't know why you guys think you went from a $100 million deficit to a surplus in 15 minutes. That's not how life works, okay? Don't tell me you know about budgets, because somebody up here approved a fraudulent financial statements just a couple months ago. And the SEC report specifically talks about having that debt claimed on the financial statements. And I gave you documents to show you that it was claimed on the financial statements. But you ignored facts and reality, and you approved that. I've been auditing books and attending meetings since 1967.
Well, thank you then.
Thank you. Years. Let's go for some decades.
Any other further comments on this subject? Okay, moving on to item number 3, the audit status. They got a verbal report on this, I believe?
Yes. The auditors have been here for 2 weeks. They did the internal control reviews that they were going to do, and they've done a lot of the substantive testing. We're down to working with them on the fixed asset GASB 34 testing that they need to do. I met with the partner of the firm just this morning. I believe she met with Todd as well, and we went through a variety of different issues we have with the valuation for the GASB 34 statement. We have a good list of the assets, real property and other, and a lot of our difficulties are with knowing how long the city has owned these assets. So trying to ascertain a value at some point in time has proven difficult in some areas. And then, of course, knowing what the useful life remaining is for that asset based on the accounting standards. So that is the last piece we've been working on with them. And then we're going to try and work out a few more details for that, and I'll be working with them directly probably for the next 2 weeks to make sure that we get that hammered out. And then we should be at a point where they'll be preparing some draft reports for me to review. And then we'll see how they look for coming for a presentation to this committee and also to the city council. But that's where we're at right now.
Are we still on target for May, I believe it is? Is
Yes.
that May? Or okay.
Yes.
Any questions on the status report?
And Milana, it will come here in draft format. It will be able to get our input at that point in time, and that will be before it goes to council.
Correct, it will. And I've discussed that with the auditors at length, so they know that's how the whole
Thank
process should work.
And is that at the April meeting or next meeting or in May?
Might be the next meeting, but my guess is going to be probably the May meeting. The GASB 34 valuation piece has slowed us down a little bit.
We have a comment?
Yes.
Libby?
Libby.
This is the SEO report?
Yes.
No, this is the
Audit report?
Okay. Yeah, this one's on number 3.
Oh,
If you want, I'll take one here.
okay. If there are no further questions on item number 3, item number 4 is the State Controller's Office Internal Control Findings Update Report, I believe it is.
Yes. The report that I have for the committee tonight is the same one that they've seen before, with our one remaining outstanding item, which is the GASB 34 valuations. And as I just indicated, we have had a few difficulties with obtaining some valuations and useful lives in accordance with the standards, but we've gotten quite a bit of the other assets taken care of. We've gotten a good deal of the infrastructure valued at this time. We used our pavement assessment report in order to determine a lot of those values that we needed to report. Knowing what properties we own has assisted as well. But our real problem is just knowing at what point in time the city took ownership of the different assets. But we think we've got all the vehicles now. We have equipment. There's some of the large machinery that the Parks and Rec department has that we also don't know how long they've had them. Some of them, like giant graders and things, they could be 25 years old, be fully depreciated. Talked with the auditors about that this morning. So we're going to take a look at some of those larger pieces of equipment on an individual basis and do some different calculations, try and get that nailed down. But we're really close to having that last piece completed. We still might possibly have a qualified opinion because we have difficulty with obtaining all of the easements and right-of-ways that the city owns. There's no master list, and so to obtain those and get a value may be difficult. And if we can't come up with a methodology that they are comfortable with, we may have to forego that piece and do more research going forward for it. So, but that is the last piece of our SCO internal controls. We will have everything else handled. We've gotten all the other pieces taken into consideration, and we've implemented as much as we can from the initial brush of their report. So.
Just from my perspective of the State Controller's Office, they came in, they did a review of the city's financial operations.
Correct.
Kind of found a lot of things wrong, right?
I believe they found everything wrong.
Everything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm understating the problem. And so they came out with this big, huge report. And I know this was a big concern several years ago. We wanted to show transparency to the community. We wanted to show them that there was a big problem out there. It's not, you're not going to fix this thing overnight. So, there was all kinds of work being done to try to set up some kind of matrix, some kind of something that the public could understand what was wrong, what was being done to fix it, and if it was fixed.
Right.
So you're saying right now, at this point in time, out of all those things, we're down to this one item kind of left?
Correct.
And in trying to be transparent, I think we try to put on the city's website this thing. I know Councilman, I can't think of his name.
Lloyd White.
Lloyd. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, Lloyd, I apologize. Councilman White was really big on this, and we wanted to make sure that this was out there. And does that still exist, or whatever happened to that? I mean,
That original checklist.
Can I clarify here?
Right.
The State Controller's Office, the findings of the State Controller's Office was put on the city website. That was part of the transparency, and putting it up on the portal was legal and proper,
Right.
and that's what we did. You're kind of mixing things.
okay.
Then there was a process with the Finance and Audit Committee where we produced a matrix or a checklist where we were going through the findings. There were approximately 65 findings from the state controllers. Correct me if I'm wrong at any point. Staff, correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you.
Sorry.
So there were approximately 65 findings. And by the way, 75 is close to 60. So there were approximately 65 findings.
If you're
And
drunk.
some of them were repetitive, actually, I believe.
They were very repetitive,
of-
yes.
Of some of those.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the purpose was for it to be tracked and corrected. The purpose wasn't to put the matrix up on the city website so that everybody could walk through the process, because it was a very complicated process where many of the things were repeated. It got down to where most of what was left on the state controller's checklist that we were trying to use as a way to make sure we went through and corrected everything, a huge portion of it was going to be addressed by new financial software. The new financial software is in place, and that took away a huge bulk, so that we are now down to a critical item, which of course is compliance with the GASB. And when that is completed, then that will be the last final item.
Okay.
And that was pretty much the story, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, is there any, no, is the state controller involved in,
He doesn't come back.
they don't come back?
He
No,
doesn't
they do not come
It's
back.
our responsibility.
It's our responsibility to check it, fix it, do whatever. The only reason he'd come back is if there was some other,
Another indication.
Another
or
indication
if they
or whatever.
determined that they wanted to come back for another
but at
review.
this point in time, they issued the report, we responded to the report, we completed most of the items on the report, and there's
Yes.
one item left.
Yes.
Correct.
And-
There is no requirement
Okay.
for any city that gets the state controller's report with findings. There is no requirement for any city to have a checklist, to have a finance and audit committee that walks through the checklist, that brings staff in, that says, where are we on the checklist? None
Okay.
of that is required.
Right.
It's not even mentioned in the state controller's report. However, it was very critical to make sure that we followed through so that we never had those findings ever again.
Right, okay. Thanks for the clarification. I think it's good for the new people here to hear that, I think, because that was a big part of this committee's efforts at the time.
And it is critical that we do get to that very last thing and that we are then done with it. Not
Right.
because anybody's coming back to check on it, but because it's our responsibility
Responsibility.
to make sure we do it right.
But the internal controls are a continuing issue that this committee always has to concern themselves with, which is part of the responsibility of the auditors. So when they do their presentation, part of it will be to discuss different issues that may have come to their attention where we need to change a policy or put in an additional step or have a different level of oversight over some function. So the internal control, the idea of internal control never stops.
As it should. I mean, you should always be vigilant when you're dealing with public money. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
The state controller's office, when they issued their documentation after they did it, was there any enforcement activity or was it just advisory?
No, it's advisory. They issued their report in draft. City management at the time then wrote their responses to each finding, and then that's what was published as the final report. But that is all that came of that. There wasn't any financial penalty or anything like that.
And no response requirement?
No
or
response
you can
required.
accept it back from the
There-
agency?
Nothing other than the original comments that were included with the report when it was finally published
Their enforcement is they send you a bill.
for their
After
time.
they have told you everything that's wrong, you pay their bill, whatever it is.
Yes.
And we did that. And then for those of you who are not on the Finance and Audit Committee, but at that point in time, the Finance and Audit Committee then created a subcommittee within itself of which Mr. Santos, Councilmember Santos was on it, which began the building of a qualitative checklist so that we could go back to the findings and measure one-on-one when we were able to take care of them.
It was a lot of work, but it was something we had to do. And I applaud all the people that were involved with making those corrections.
It was a very extensive laundry list, but they basically took almost their entire manual, and it all hit the city of Beaumont. I think there were only one or two items that didn't. So.
Any other questions from the committee members? We have a public comment?
Yes. Libby?
Libby, you're up.
Chair. Oh, no, she didn't.
This is item number 4.
The investigative audit from the State Controller's Office was produced because I begged them and screamed at them for 3 years. And I took in a document for them. Give me the look. Back to this. Funny story. I was just writing up another complaint to the State Controller's Office about you guys. Let's go over it. Noncompliance with Government Code Section 12464. You forged your financial statements. Again, just last month. It's actually illegal not to claim your bond debt right there on the front page. Lack of proper accounting records, bond issuance, still goes on. But let's get to the important part. Adequate oversight over contract awards. If you read the State Controller's Office, you promised that you would follow state law. What Ms. Carroll did not explain is that the Audit Committee is federal law because you have bonds, which makes it also state law. It is state law that you have public bid contracts for any contracts over $5,000. It's written in the SEO report. They wrote it out for you. You promised them. November 7th, 2017, Council approves Agenda Item 18, increased bid contract to $25,000 without going through Council. Council voted 5-0. Let me give you the quote from your city attorney that's advising you on legal matters. Knowing that it was a wait, where's this quote at? I'm going to recuse myself. It's written on, I printed them both out for you. November 7th and November 21st, when they brought it back for the state reading. City Attorney John Patterson states, we have a potential conflict of interest because the ordinance involves the procurement of professional services, which obviously we provide. So out of an abundance of caution, we're going to recuse ourselves. They recuse themselves because it's illegal to approve government contracts for more than $5,000 without going in front of the council, and specifically in sewers, because everybody steals out of the sewer. It is an epidemic in this state. You have a $110 million sewer project, Mr. Santos. In case you were wondering if there's any big expenses coming up, some people consider $110 million a lot of money.
Thank you. Any response? No? No, yeah, I know.
Go ahead and respond.
We violate state and federal laws. It's so funny.
Okay.
Sorry, it's my birthday today, and it was my son. It was my son calling me and saying happy birthday. Anyway, okay, we're on item number. No further questions then?
I just have one.
You have
So,
a comment?
Milana, you'll be able to update us on another meeting on where you are at with that one item that still needs, after you get time to discuss it with the auditors and see what the final answer is on that.
Yes, we will discuss it with this committee, and you'll also receive the report of the listing and the assumptions and the whole, how did we get to this point and how did we get these values?
All right, thank you.
That's good. Okay, item number 5, financial reporting defined. It's kind of a nebulous subject. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so at the last meeting, I was instructed to try to provide a flow of accounting reports, what they are, what's included in them, how they come together. And I started with just the basics because I wasn't sure how far into detail we wanted to go or how familiar all of the members of the committee are with the different kinds of reporting. But accounting is basically taking original documents and taking that historical number evidence and putting it into a general ledger system. It starts with having a journal. So you have document, you're creating a journal. In the old days, everything was manual, and you had these manila sheets, and you'd write down. So you had a purchasing journal. So every invoice that came in, you enter each invoice and what expense or what asset it would be coded to. Then your journal comes together. You have a purchasing journal, a payroll journal, a disbursements journal, a receipts journal, all these different functions in journals, and you take all the journals and you enter them then into the general ledger. The general ledger is, instead of transactional in nature by date, it's account number based. So it would start with the first account of your trial balance, which is generally cash, and it would have all the transactions of that bank account listed from all of the journals. So we'll give you beginning balance, all the activity debits, credits, the net of the debit and credit, and then an ending balance, and then it would move to the next account. So you would have all of the details, account by account, with all of the ending account balances. When you get to the end of that, then it goes to a trial balance. The trial balance is just a summary. It's just the account number and the name and what's the balance, and it lists them all. Then that information is taken, manipulated into various financial reports. It could be the balance sheet, which, depending on the different basis of accounting, has a different title. It could be a balance sheet. It can be a statement of assets, liabilities, and equity. It can be a statement of net position. It just depends on what kind of entity you're dealing with, but it's all the same thing. It's assets, liabilities, and equity. Then you have the income statement, revenues and expenses, generally over a period of time, where the balance sheet is at a particular point in time. So you have your revenues, your expenses. It can also be called a statement of activities. The other statements that's usually used for public companies is a statement of retained earnings, because they like to look at equity per share, dividends per share. There's a lot of things for the equity section. And then the last is the cash flow. The cash flow is something that is required for companies, public companies, privately held companies, and enterprise funds for governments, but they don't have a cash flow report that's required for governmental activities. Although it sounds like Gatsby's working towards that endeavor, but that's what the cash flow statement is for. Then I gave you a comparison of what kinds of statements were set up, different journals and statements that were set up in the old system and what's in the new system, what I could generate from the old system, what I couldn't, and what I can do with the new system as well. I don't know if there were further questions or if there was more detail that any members of the committee were looking for that. That's kind of a broad overview of the statements.
So the Great Plains was the old
Yes.
system, and the Tyler in Code 10 is the new system.
Yes.
Obviously, it's a better system because it provides you with a lot of availability on all the different, I can't believe these other systems never
Well, I can
were able to
tell
run
you
those
that
reports.
not that it's not capable. Great Plains is a fairly sturdy software program. It was not set up to where these kinds of reports could be generated. It can be done, but it wasn't.
Okay.
So when you're noting that cash flow statement is partially available, does that mean it's only available for certain accounts or certain GL strings or lines?
It's that treasury report that I provide. That is what the system considers a cash flow, but in the technical standards for accounting, that is not a cash flow statement. So that's really why I said partially available. It is available in this format, but not in the formal sense.
Does the partial cash flow capability, is it available for purposes of projecting or forecasting expenses rather than revenue coming in? Do we have a way that we could budget out our expenses in more of a cash flow way, in an even flow, or?
No, not with this particular software function. We've been working with a couple of forecasting models to see what works best for the city in order to do a better job of that. We're looking at a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year, kind of how to get the forecast to work out right. But this software isn't built for doing the future forecasting piece. So that would be different.
Thank you.
Milana,
Yes.
I like this fund balance report. Would that muddy up the waters to?
No. I can do that one as well. Let me see the,
It's just one, but it's pretty simple.
there's only a bazillion you can
Oh,
so that's why I like, which one is it?
this is pretty straightforward.
Yes, this is just, it's kind of like in the balance sheet.
It's just, yeah, the balance in those funds.
Yeah, but the only thing that I'm worried about is people thinking this means cash.
Well,
It's not.
I know.
It's equity.
Do you need to get back? I don't know if it's being recorded or not.
Can't hear me at all. Sorry.
That's why I say I don't want to
Yep.
muddy up
Yeah,
waters.
no. So it's not beginning cash to ending cash, but it's beginning equity, then it's the revenues and expenses and the ending equity. So what this would tell you is the net position of the funds, which could be, if this one will say the ending equity balance of the general fund, it says $4.8 million. Doesn't mean we have $4.8 million in cash, but it means we have 4.8 more in assets than we do in liabilities. Does that make sense? And that's why, I mean, usually when you look at statements, people think money. And this isn't money, this is just part of the whole accounting, reporting, what have we got kind of a thing. So,
Well, I think it's important to make that differentiation because assets don't necessarily pay your bills, but cash does. So
That's
you
right.
got to be cash flow actually.
That's
pays your
right.
bills, yeah.
That's
So you
right.
got to be aware of.
right.
But assets are important; they have to be accounted for, and that's what Gatsby is all about.
Right. So this tells you if we have a fund that's upside down, you know, if we're looking at a fund that's dysfunctional, maybe, but it's not going to, if you understand accounting and you know what that equity represents, then you're good. But if you're thinking like cash basis type things, then you would be confused. So, but that's something we can work
Yeah,
through.
mine. Okay.
I'm glad you raised that.
I think it's interesting to look at our funds, like
It is. It's good to know that we have a positive position in the different funds. When you look at, and I don't know, is it on there, Fund 300?
Yeah, debt service.
Yeah, see how that's backwards? Debt service fund doesn't have assets, it only has liabilities, so the equity is going to be upside down. So that's the one you look at it and go, oh, right, no, that's just, what debt do we have? So that one is upside down. It will always be upside down, and otherwise we should be in a good position in the other funds. The one thing with the general ledger, the general ledger is for every account that you have set up in your system, all of them. All of your assets, all of your liabilities, your equities, your revenues, your expenses, everything. So when you add them all up, accounting is a double entry animal. It better be zero. If it's not zero, you're out of balance. So your beginning balance of all of it together, zero. Then you have all your transactions, and your ending balance, when you net them all together, better be zero, because you need to make sure all of your debits and your credits equal. So when you're looking at the financial statements, that's why you look at things at a point in time or during a time frame, because we're not saying that the beginning balance is zero when you look at those totals. We're saying when you added all the accounts up, it came to zero, like it's supposed to. And then you can look at the different groupings of accounts and what it looks like and what does it mean and how do we measure and all of that fun stuff.
So that could be very deceptive to
Yes.
someone who saw a zero beginning and a zero ending.
Correct. Those
and
aren't
have an
accounts,
understanding of what
Those are-
happened during the
totals. Right,
30 days or whatever.
right.
They could say that
Yes.
you were wrong
Right.
and foolish for
Right.
having zero beginning and zero
Right.
ending.
If cash is $1,000 and liabilities is $500 and revenue is $500, they net zero because you got a debit and a credit, zero. So total of all of them, zero. And that's how accounting works. Always have both sides. If you don't have both sides, accountants go crazy. Don't do that. So always have both sides.
Thank you for that
You're welcome.
enlightening explanation. Appreciate that.
Question?
Yeah, just another question.
Sure.
Based upon the financial statement explanations, And looking back to what we were looking at for the inventory, addressing the controller's office requirement for inventory, asset inventory. So it looked like, if I was understanding it before, the inventory is complete. Valuations are approximately 75% complete.
Yes.
And so April, we're looking at targeting for is hopefully to have a draft form of that.
Of that whole list. And it is massive. I will tell you that now. I mean, because if you think about what does the city own, it's a lot of things. So what I'll try to do is, yes, I'll give you the details, but I'll try and highlight the pages where, like for infrastructure, it's the totals page, because you'll get buried in the middle of that thing. It's by street segments. Street segments, like from this block to that block, this street. I mean, it's many pages long. And then with the fixed assets, what I'm going to try to do once we get through everything is put vehicles like in its own listing, because after a while, vehicles are vehicles are vehicles. When we have a police department, we're going to have a ton of vehicles. But it's the other equipment that maybe would be of more interest, or maybe it's the real property the city owns, things like that. So I'll try and have it segmented in ways that will maybe be useful informationally for the members of the committee.
So when the listed inventory and the valuations are determined to attempt to meet the compliance of the requirement of what was neglected in the past, as a future tool for budgeting purposes, for, let's say, fixed equipment, operational equipment, maybe the police department, public safety, cars, vehicles, things like that, will we have an aging on a life cycle of those vehicles that eventually can be determined for allocating a future budget where these things go away later on and they have to be replaced, and money should be set aside for that, so that it's...
Yes, indeed. That is the whole plan. So once we get the list with all the valuations and we can get it in the format we need, we have a software that we've already started playing with, but of course we're going to have to re-upload everything when we get it. And we'll be able to use that report to determine things that are coming towards the end of their useful life. We can start looking at replacement cycles for different things. We've kind of manually started the replacement cycle on vehicles because, I mean, you have to keep replacing them. So we couldn't just say, well, since we don't have a handle on it right at the moment, everybody just stop, use the car you've got. That doesn't really work very well, especially for the police. So we're working on making this have a lot more information to back our decisions so that we make the smart decisions, that we do things in the right way with the right cycles. We'll still have problems with maybe getting a lemon and having to replace a car out of cycle. It happens. Things do occur with that. But we want to have more information to guide us in making the right decisions for the big stuff. And that is definitely what we're working towards now.
Thank you.
I'm going to elaborate a little bit because we have some new members.
Sure.
And you correct me, please, if I say anything that is not accurate. We, as a city, we did not have any evaluation, pretty much, of any assets. We were starting from scratch. And the people that were here when things were purchased, machinery, capital machinery, whatever, the people who were here, they were gone. And we didn't want them back. They were gone. But they had done no or very limited or very poor record keeping. So for many of the things that we are now trying to basically provide an asset valuation to the world. We had nothing. And so now we have to do real estate, we have to do streets, we have to do any piece of equipment that's over $5,000. Sometimes we don't know when it was purchased. They kept very bad records. We may not even know when it was purchased, but somehow or other, we have to do an evaluation of it so that we can produce it as a real recorded asset. Mm-hmm. And we can't guess because we need to do the best possible point of beginning that we can for these auditors so that we have a good sound floor to go forward with. And we also want to follow their feedback on what it is that we're doing and making sure that we're doing it right. So the job that Milana is doing right now of evaluating the world is huge. It couldn't possibly be any bigger. And that was the item on the state controller's report that wasn't done. But the size of it was so humongous that we basically, you take a bite of an elephant at a time if you want to eat the whole elephant. And that's basically what Milana started doing. So, so to answer some of your questions, Steve, absolutely. There is more work to be done, and nobody's giving anybody a pass on the quantity of work that still remains to be done, or the quality, really, of it. But that's the point that we're at now. And when we had systems like Great Plains in place, Great Plains is nice software, but if you keep your software about 8 or 9 years old and never upgrade it, and you don't buy all the modules, you might as well go back to a manual journal at that point, because you've really given yourself a huge downstroke, and that's the situation that we're in. So all of the software got updated, we have to value all the assets, all of this all needs to be done at the same time. It was all rolled into the problems with the state controller's report, and nobody's trying to paint it as a rosy picture. There are big pieces that still need to be done, such as finishing a proper valuation, but that's where we're at.
Right.
Did I say anything wrong?
No.
Okay.
I will say, adding to that, that the enterprise funds, which is the wastewater fund and the transit fund, because they're run like businesses, their assets were always recorded because the standard always said that you had to. Government standards didn't say you had to record assets, so you never did. You just, because you budgeted for an expense, so when you bought it, it went against the expense, you did it, okay, done, and it goes away. It doesn't actually stay on the balance sheet because it never went there. Then about 10, 12 years ago, the standards changed and said, whoa, cities, counties, states, special districts, you have significant assets. True, you can't sell them, but we believe that you need to have them recorded. Somebody needs to know what these different government entities hold. And previous management just decided that they just were not going to implement the standards, so they just didn't. And in not doing it, that left us with a blank sheet of paper. And so we have identified all of the, well, we think we've identified all of the things the city owns. There could still be things that we missed, and heavens to Betsy's if we did. We just need to be told so we can do whatever we need to do, title search, whatever, in order to get that accounted for. But we believe we have a very good all-inclusive list of as many things as we could even just think of, because it came down to, well, what do we have? Do you know what we have? How about you? Do you know what we have? How long have we had that? Where did that come from? Did we buy that or someone give it to us? Did a developer build it and then gift it to the city? Those have to be valued. The parks. I had to make a list of all the parks, and then I had to go through and figure out the amenities in each park, because each amenity has a different cost basis. And the land you can't depreciate. And I got basketball courts, and I've got softball fields and baseball fields and pavilions and parking. And yeah, it is horrible. It's horrible to think of everything and try not to forget anything. So when we get to this point where we believe we've got it all and we bring it to this committee, by all means, if you know what, I know the city. I thought the city owned property on the corner of. Tell me, we will find out, because I wouldn't be surprised if there's something I still don't know that we didn't come across somewhere, or that a current employee of the city remembers that they thought that the city had at one time, and that's a lot of how we got some of this. So, yes, it's been a massive undertaking, but the next meeting, it's a lot of paper. So, but I will provide it, and we will go through it.
Any further questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank the mayor, too, for making that clarification, because that's a very important clarification. It's unfortunate things have happened the way they happened, but we're not looking at the past. We're progressing to the future, and that's where we're all moving right now. So anyway, No further questions. We'll move on to item number 6, future agenda items. I just have one that we discussed, the CFD accounting, CFD fund accounting,
For the service fees.
service fees, yeah,
Not the bond.
service fees.
I have that too, if you want that too. Don't want that too?
One thing on a
Got it, okay. One thing at a time.
Should give it to you.
Is there anything else that the committee would like to?
I was looking forward to this item on the agenda. I would like, you actually made me think of this, Steve. I would like to know what it is about the city finances, basically Steve stepped up on this, that you would like to know more about. Now, Milana has a very full plate. However, if we make a list of what it is that you, potential future agenda items, that you would just like to know more about, such as your suggestion, which was very good, by the way, then I feel like we can all come to where we have enough of an understanding, because often I will sit there and I have an advantage. I can go find out about it. But there'll be something where, gee, I would really like to know, what do we do about, does animal control pay for itself? Are we doing something that's, fiscally irresponsible? Are we paying for something else? Whatever it is, if you would make a suggestion as to any area of the city that you would like to know more about, and I don't care if it's something you think maybe we're doing something wrong at. If there's anything you would like to have as a future agenda item, I'm going to ask everybody to answer. So nobody's going to get to be able to sit and be quiet. So I'm going to start with Ray, because he's more accustomed to my picking on him. Is there anything you would like to see? A little bit more discussion on financially, Ray? He's like me, though. He has advantages. He gets to ask more questions.
No, the most important to me is the updating of the financial, on a monthly basis, if possible, quarterly, and so we could see that, and also I know you mentioned retained earnings, and we on the government we use a reserve on that, or we put it on reserve. Is that correct?
The
Instead
equity,
of returning earnings on the beverage.
right, we have fund balance
Fund
for each
balance.
fund, which is what we have. And then as we move forward with positive fund balance, which is always the goal, we're going to start setting aside reserves. So we just started doing that with fiscal 17 that the auditors are looking at now. So I'll have a good solid definitive number of what our reserves are at June 17 when they are done with those numbers. But that's the plan going
That's
forward.
very good, because everybody will understand, to arrive to a zero balance underneath, on that.
Right.
That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Richard, you're next. We're going around the room.
Oh, you're going around the table?
Yeah, you're next.
Oh, we get to look at a lot of numbers here. We get to look at a lot of reports. We look at the past. We look at trying to project the future. But it is a finance and audit committee, and to me, finances entail a lot more than just looking at figures and reports and all that. In terms of what is the city doing to maintain and move forward with providing adequate financing for the future. And I'm talking about, what are we doing in terms of business development? What are we doing in terms of getting, I see so much vacant commercial property around here. We have been in great economic times for the last 5-6 years. There's nothing happening in Beaumont that I'm aware of. We have a few things popping up, but with our population, you take the collective population of the cities of Beaumont, Banning, Calamasa, the Pass area, we got over 100,000 people in this area. That should be an incentive to get businesses coming here. And every time the council hears this, people step up. We shop in Redlands, we shop in Reno Valley. There's nothing to do. That is a big concern. Mm-hmm. And, from a committee standpoint, there's not a lot we can do other than kind of maybe keep pressing the issue that, we want the city to do more in this area.
So can I make a suggestion along those lines? Economic Development Committee or Todd, we'll get someone, probably Todd, ask him to come give a few minutes to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Absolutely.
Because
We just had a whole conversation this afternoon.
I know.
I don't know how you do that, but we were talking about nothing but economic development this afternoon. So at the next meeting, I will
Like
have
ESB,
him,
no.
I will have him do a presentation to the committee about the things that he has on his mind, that the direction that he's trying to take the city in as far as economic development. So I will put that on as
put
like a city manager
down.
report
Yep.
for our next meeting.
I think that's important. I don't know if you
Well,
agree
the
with me,
next
but
meeting or the meeting after that, depending on his schedule, but
True, I
let's
will
see.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, personally, I think that will keep us energized and keep us moving forward as a committee, because as we think things are developing out there, we know we're gonna have some money, and it makes reading these reports and everything make a little more sense in terms of.
There is,
what
by
we're
the
doing.
way, if you don't know, there is an Economic Development Committee that meets the second Wednesday of every month at 6 PM. 6 PM? 4 PM, sorry, 4 PM. Thank you, Heather. And so any of you are more than welcome to go to that meeting and hear what's being discussed, and you can fill out a speaker slip and get up and say, I want more, or whatever. So by all means,
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And you can watch them after they're posted too, because they're recorded as well, so you
Oh,
can
yes,
watch them
they
after
do.
the
They
fact.
record that, that's right. So you can get it on the city website. So, good question. Steve, do you have another one?
I do, but I just, to clarify, the one that I mentioned earlier, it would just be nice to see a tracking, some kind of a spreadsheet that shows the assessment districts, the revenue
Yes.
that was gathered, and then projected expenses or actuals, depending on how. And I realize the workload, the resources available that right now, and this is not something I'm want to see necessarily next month, but if we could
Yeah.
just look forward to a targeting of that, so there's an expectation for maybe next year, where it can be tracked with the revenues that come from the revenue streams that come from the county tax collection for those services. That would be great, because I think it would show everybody, property owners, when they're paying that other line on their bill, they might be able to ascertain or become informed of where those improvements are happening, maintenance-wise or other, within their assessment district, and they can see the benefits or the percentage of an overall city improvement that's credited as a percentage to their assessment district, along with the other district fees, assessments that come in.
Right.
The other thing I was asking about, and I don't know if this is appropriate or proper, just based upon my own background, with the initiation of the Potrero interchange that's taking place, it's in its basic initiation right now, after award, the startup and everything, is there an ability for somebody like myself on this committee, not in a supervisory role or necessarily in an audit role, but more of an educational role, to understand how the city cash flows that for payment apps and payments or something like that?
I'm sorry, how the city did what?
Just to have an understanding of how the revenue comes in, let's say from a grant, how it gets dispersed through the contractor, and how the tracking mechanism is on that.
Actually,
Absolutely. I have a project accounting module.
There you go.
And I have it for each project, but specifically, I can pull the one for Potrero. We can look at what we've done so far. We can talk about the cash that's available, not available, the grants, how we're managing the grant, the costs we've had to date, what amounts we've encumbered for contracts that we've signed but haven't maybe written the checks for yet. Absolutely, we can go through the whole project analysis for that.
And I don't know if the whole committee would like to do it, and I don't know if it's appropriate from one member just to become knowledgeable of what it is, just so they have a better understanding.
well, you're going to do it on a summary level, right?
Yes,
Right.
absolutely,
So
because
it's
it is
probably
something I have available,
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
No, I think any major project that involves that kind of cash is important for this committee to make sure, number one, it's on track. And then if there's any, like in a lot of projects, any kind of overruns or I mean, you know, we need to know
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Get it,
Well,
get it
I want
ceased.
to clarify one point, just so that we don't get too far off track. We were formed to serve the council, to understand things on a deeper level and ask questions on a deeper level on financial issues, to make sure that the council didn't have to spend a whole meeting talking about any one of these reports, because we would have done it. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so critical to make sure that people on this committee have a good understanding of budgets and financial backgrounds, et cetera, to be able to do that. We are not chartered with doing project oversight. So the Potrero is an unusual situation where by all means we should have a summary, but I don't want us to think that we're in a direction where we have some sort of oversight on projects, because we don't. That's the council.
Right, it's only the review of the financial transactions, but we do have them we're tracking them by project. So the larger ones absolutely can come to the committee for review. Potrero is a large one now, and the next one that's following up right behind it is going to be the wastewater treatment plant expansion. So those two, absolutely, we can get familiar with the project report by using Potrero, so that when we start having more activity on the wastewater expansion, the committee will be familiar with the reports, and we'll be able to just present them at the meeting so that you have them.
Yeah, I don't want to overstep the boundaries of the
But
council.
financial oversight
Right,
is critical.
but the financial oversight is fine. And as I said, those are reports I have available because we're tracking them in that manner, so.
Yeah, okay.
Sharon?
That's what I was gonna ask for.
Okay.
Okay. Anna? Anything you want to add?
Anything,
Anything.
No, I like, all the reports that you give. I would suggest that if maybe along with the treasury report, I know if there could be a way of getting, like just the page from the bank statements that has the accounts and any, like an actual bank.
oh, having the bank statements?
Right,
Those,
you can block out the account.
and I do that. They are actually available on the city's website
Okay.
in the, what do we call it? Transparency portal.
Transparency portal.
And if you go to the finance folder,
Laserfish.
and Laserfish, yes. And then the bank rec folder, then, because there's 80 bazillion of them, go to 1718, the fiscal year.
'cause
They
I'm
are
like, I've
all
gone in
there. There's 1,000 things, yes. But if you go to 1718, then you can see the bank statements. And actually this morning, I uploaded all of the February statements. So they're all there.
Just to, I there was no point in yelling, but I could see her frustration as to wanting us to be transparent, but there's a way to talk. And just so that everybody can see, like, we're not just sitting here and we're not
Right.
just being redundant, we're actually trying to be transparent. You're actually trying to figure out how many assets there is and all that, maybe talk to the county. Is that something that we can know, like, what the county can do to facilitate your job as to a list of all the properties or easements that?
It's difficult because a lot of them aren't recorded because they're government owned, so they're not taxed. So
So figure it out.
it's been tough.
So
Yes, it's been
let me
tough.
ask you this, because this might be timely. What about, we have many new members, and we have this Laserfish portal
Laserfish.
where everything is scanned and put in there. Could we have a little demo
Yeah.
for
we can
the
do that.
Finance and Audit Committee so that everybody knew how to get any supplementary financial information? And by the way, the public knows, most of the public that is interested knows how to get this information. And the only time that there's an issue is sometimes things get backlogged because of redaction that needs to be done. But instead of still do whatever you need to do, Anna, but in supplement for that, maybe just a quick Laserfish demo so that everybody knows how easy it is or is not, in which case we can make sure we know that
We can
too.
fix that, yes.
But that would, because there was a lot of money spent to getting Laserfish and getting it up there and getting the right amount of user licenses. We didn't have enough right away, and if so many people were on, nobody else could get in.
You get
So
locked out, it was a real mess.
We really put the money and the effort behind trying to do the best job we could so that that financial transparency was there for anybody to see whatever they needed. And you should know that, and you should be able to see that. So that
And we
could
do
be a
have,
good
yeah, we
future
can do that, and we do have a little time lag on things being uploaded, like the invoices that we paid last week, they're not up yet. They will, but they're not there yet. I think we're 2, maybe 3 weeks behind the timing, because once everything's paid, then we gotta scan it all. And then we gotta make sure we have it, and then it gets categorized in the right place. It just takes a little time, but we're not too far behind in posting there. Not everything is available there, absolutely, that would be way too tedious. But the things that people tend to ask about the most, we try to keep it up to date so that it's on the website. But next time, sure, we can definitely do that.
Donna, I'm not going to overlook you, even though you are not an official member.
I'll pass.
Okay, all right.
You've all added great
Okay,
ideas.
Wendy, you're the newest. And so I figure there has to be something. And by all means, sometimes it's like people say things like, well, they're not saying enough about this, or they're not doing this. So if there is anything that you would like to know more about, what is it?
This is only my second meeting.
I know.
So I have.
So
I'm
Laserfish
just
would
learning
help you,
about-
right? And then, at any point in time, if there's anything, when we get together the next time, please bring it for a future agenda
Okay,
item.
I went through the whole. thing.
Anything that you need.
But it's like I'm so new to Beaumont.
I know you are.
And it can be so overwhelming. There's just so much to
I have to
know.
say.
But if nothing else, I want everybody on this committee to know that there is nothing financially that you cannot ask and cannot ask to see. And, you know, it's going to be a pretty unusual thing that we would not be able to respond to that. So by all means, at any point in time, not just this meeting, but any future agenda item, even if a neighbor of yours says, you know, they're not doing this, if you want to bring that in, you bring that in. Because once you sit here, you have a certain responsibility to know what's going on, and we do not want to short shrift you on that. So by all means.
And you can always send me a message if there's something that you really just don't know and you think it's a quick answer. If it is, I'll give you a quick answer. If it's more involved, I'll tell you that's not as easy as you think, and then we can talk about bringing it to the next meeting in more detail. So I'm open to any of that as well.
And Milana, I sort of started this little role, but by all means, I know that you have a schedule of your own outside of this meeting that you have to keep. So we are not expecting the next meeting to have every agenda item that we've discussed, plus a Laserfish demo, plus the
What?
update on the asset evaluation.
How about if I add 2 items for the next agenda?
Okay. So,
One would be that I would like to present this committee with an update on our sewer fee study. I think this committee should be informed on what has transpired. The fees have not been changed yet. That hasn't happened. They've gone back and done more work on the fee study. So I believe it would be fair for this committee to hear some of that information. And the other thing is with the SEC. There's a lot that's going to be discussed tomorrow night with the council, with the SEC matter. The SEC matter doesn't involve the Finance Committee directly. The entire agreement really is directing City Council to take certain actions. But after tomorrow night's meeting, and they go through all the things they're going to go through, I think it might be helpful if we do like a summary for this committee so that you all know what the SEC was about, why they've required things that they've required, what we've done, and then where we are on the timeline. I won't know where we are on the timeline until the council makes some decisions tomorrow night. Then we'll really know where we stand on that and being in total compliance with everything they've wanted. So I believe an update on the SEC matter would be something the committee would be interested in next time as well.
Okay, and I have one. I think at some point, because we've got so many new members, I think we should have a summary overview of what we have done to refinance the bonds. And so take it from why we looked at refinancing the bonds, what we did to refinance the bonds, what it meant to the people who lived in the areas where the bonds were refinanced, why there were some we couldn't, and what our next plan is.
Excellent.
And that's all. Just that, nothing more.
I don't need to sleep for the next month. It's okay. No problem. Because
Okay.
I know we will be looking at a new round of those. Probably not for this year because we just have a lot of other things.
I know.
But we're watching the market because the interest rates.
Creeping up.
Yeah, and so
Yes.
that affects the whole market, and we don't want to refinance and have people pay more. That's kind of a dumb thing. So.
And I don't expect it to be like Bond 101, but for this committee.
To know
that
what we're
weren't
looking
sitting
for.
here, you know, we were in a situation where we looked at the bonds. They could be refinanced, a great large number of them. That was done, why we did it, what we're hoping to accomplish, what we did, and that should be a walk in the park for you. Piece of cake.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure it is. I'm just kidding. No problem.
You're not going to be speaking to me after this meeting.
I think all these suggestions, I think it was a great idea, number one, having a round table. And I think all the suggestions that were presented are excellent suggestions.
Absolutely.
And again, we're not looking back, we're moving forward, we're progressing, and that's what needs to be done.
And these are all good things to know
Absolutely.
going forward and how we can implement these things and have the right ideas. So it's great.
Absolutely.
And we should really, you know, make sure, especially on some of these, that maybe we can fill the seats for that too, because there's a number of new members that would enjoy hearing a lot of these
Oh, sure.
topics gone through. So I'll make sure we do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, last item is the meeting review, Treasurer's Monthly Finance and Audit Committee report to council.
Okay.
You're gonna spend an hour telling the council what we did?
Basically going through the agenda, financial reports for January, the status of the audit, and the SCO update, what we learned about the GASB 34, the flow of the accounting reports, just an overview of what we talked about, and I'm not sure, I have a lot of future agenda items there.
You do.
Did you take it?
Yes, they're all future agenda items, we could list them. I
You
have,
can just pick a few highlights if you'd
I
like.
have summary of SEC cease and desist order, is that, I don't know, if that's how you want it worded. Update on the sewer fee study, CFD services accounting by district. Reserve balance, I'm not sure how to word that, what? Is it what we're doing for future reserves?
Setting aside resources for future.
Okay.
Sharon, I don't think you're going to have to list them all, but you might pick 2 or 3 and say, we came up with a whole list of you know, topics that we'd like to hear, and
Yeah.
here are some highlights from it, and just leave it at that,
Yeah.
probably.
Okay.
I think it's important for the council to realize that we are moving forward. We are interested in a lot of different things going on in the city, and this is a very important committee. And even though it's not mandated by the state, I think every city needs some kind of a citizen group that
It's best practices.
best practices, absolutely, and best practices in place. If there are no further items for this committee to discuss this evening, I'll adjourn the meeting at, that's 7:35